Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Dr. Manmohan Singh, India's 14th Prime Minister, remains one of the most influential figures in the nation's post-independence history. Better known as the architect of India's economic reforms in the 1990s, as well as the driving force behind the historic India-US civil nuclear energy deal. His leadership transformed India into one of the world's fastest growing economies and a global power in its own right. But beyond his pivotal role in India's economic rise, Dr. Manmohan Singh's legacy is defined by his unwavering integrity, intellectual depth and rigor, and dedication to public service. His career trajectory stands as a testament to a life dedicated to both economic progress and public welfare. We'll take a look at some of the landmark moments that define the professional and political career of Dr. Manmohan Singh, right from the time that he graduated from some of the topmost educational institutions in United Kingdom, that was the Oxford Institute, and then taking a look at a number of prestigious posts that he was responsible for heralding, including the Chief Economic Advisor, including the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission, as well as being part of the Commerce Ministry in the capacity of the Finance Secretary. Let's take a look at his career from the educational qualifications right up to the time he became the Prime Minister of the country. Here's a look in 1952. And there is a picture of him, the batch where he was studying MA Economics. This is from Punjab University in Chandigarh. He stood first in his batch passed with flying colours. This is in 1954. Wright's Prize for Distinguished Performance at St. John's College in Cambridge. This is in 1955 and 1957. He received the Wrenbury Scholar Prize at the University of Cambridge for his exceptional educational qualifications. In fact, taking a look at the DPhil that he finished in Oxford University and DLit honoris causa that he was granted at Oxford in 1957. He finished his PhD thesis on India's export competitiveness, after which he decided to be a professor between 1957 and 1959 as the senior lecturer in economics at the Punjab University in Chandigarh. That was his alma mater as well when he went back to teach the students. 1959 to 1963, he was a reader economics in Punjab University once again, and then he moved on from 1963 to 1965, professor of economics in Punjab University once again. And then in 1969 up until 1971, he was professor at the International Trade Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi, honorary professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. So, being an academic, he decided to go on and teach at various universities, first in Chandigarh and then in Delhi. In 1996, he was professor at the Delhi School of Economics at the University of Delhi. And this time period, 1966, he became the Economics Affairs Officer. So, from the time that he devoted to teaching in various universities as professor, he moved on to his to increasing his professional qualifications, wherein in 1966 to 1969, he was the chief at the Financing for Trade section at UNCTAD. This was in terms of framing policies when it came to the growth of Global South. 1972 to 1974, he was the deputy for India in the IMF Committee of 20 on International Monetary Reform. So, he carried on his legacy as an economist and provided his expertise in formulating these guidelines. In 1977 to 1979, he led the Indian delegation to AID India Consortium meetings. And these, in fact, the pictures that depict the landmark events in the life of Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was taking part in these key roles in various organizations. In 1980, between 1980 and 1982, this is the Indo-Soviet Joint Planning Group meeting, which he is seen participating in. Moving on, in 1982, the Indo-Soviet Monitoring Group meeting, where he played an integral role. He led the team to build consensus. In 1993, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting taking place in Cyprus, and that image depicts the meeting that was held in this region. Let's take a look at 1993, where he participated in the Human Rights World Conference taking place in Vienna in Austria. Moving on to the years that passed from 1971 to 1972, he was the economic advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Trade. He graduated from there and got into the role of being the chief economic advisor at the Ministry of Finance from 1972 to 1976. He further graduated to accomplishing bigger tasks in 1976 to 1980. He was the director of the Reserve Bank of India. He was director at the Industrial Development Bank of India, alternate governor for India, Board of Governors, Asian Development Bank, alternative governor for India, Board of Governors, IBRD. So he wore various hats and accomplished a number of achievements during this tenure. In 1976 up until April 1980, he was the secretary at the Ministry of Finance in the Department of Economic Affairs. He was member of the Atomic Energy Commission. He was member of the Finance and Space Commissions as well. So he took up these tasks and was adept at fulfilling all of his responsibilities diligently. From April 1980 up until September 15, 1982, he was the member secretary of the Planning Commission, an important task that was given to him, keeping in mind his achievements and fulfillment of all tasks provided to him. 1980 to 1983, he was the chairperson of the Indian Committee of the Indo-Japan Joint Study. Moving on, he also was brought into the limelight. This was in September 16, 1982 up until January 14, 1985, where he was the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Recognizing his acumen of being an economist par excellence, this task was bestowed upon him. 1982 to 1985, alternate governor for India, Board of Governors, International Monetary Fund. So this was right after. In 1983, 1984, he was member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. This was the time when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister of the country. 1985, he was the president of the Indian Economic Association. And moving on, on January 15th, 1985 up until 31st of July 1987, he was the deputy chairperson of the Planning Commission, a very prestigious position. Was said to be, the deputy chairperson of the Planning Commission was said to be of the level of a cabinet minister back in the day. August 1st, 1987 up until 10th November 1990, he was the Secretary General and the Commissioner of South Commission in Geneva. Moving on, he grew up the ranks. This was from 1990 up until 1991. He was advisor to the Prime Minister on economic affairs. So taking large strides from moving on from his professional career to closing in on working with the Prime Minister. From 15th of March 1991 to 20th of June 1991, he was the chairman of the University Grants Commission. And then this is the dissertation that was written by Manmohan Singh, India's export trends and the prospects for self-sustained growth. This was in the time period when he was heading the University Grants Commission. Let's take a look at the other achievements of Dr. Manmohan Singh. And this is interesting to note. Dr. Manmohan Singh had time and again mentioned Ian D. Little, who was a British economist, and he attributed a number of his successes to his mentor, Ian Little. In that particular dissertation that he wrote under the mentorship of Ian Little, he put forth the argument and said he presented a compelling case for free trade and emphasized the importance of exports, which later on, in terms of his policy formulation as finance minister, was reflective in India's growth story. Economies worldwide were focusing on internal development through import substitution was the key role that played in the dissertation that he put out in his during the tenure. He also spoke about how imports have to be paid for either by current export earnings or by withdrawal from reserves of foreign exchange or by fresh capital inflow. And as I said, these were all reflective later on when he got the chance to bring about a transformation in the country's economy as the finance minister and later on as the prime minister of the country. In the long run, the import capacity of an economy and its ability to utilize the above mentioned benefits of international trade is crucially dependent on its export capacity. That led to the finance minister under the P.V. Narasimha Rao government to ensure that export subsidies were reduced, which allowed for the FDI to get into the country up unto 51%. And he became the theoretical groundwork for India's economic decades later in 1991. Having taken a look at the academic successes of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and obviously the varied number of roles that he played under prime ministers as somebody who was the governor of the country, RBI at one point of time. At a point of time, he was also the chairperson of the University Grants Commission. When you take a look at his career as the chief economic advisor, these are all important positions that he held, where he worked very closely in close quarters with the governments of the day, or all the governments that were led by the UPA, that were led by the Congress, is where he got these important prominent positions to fulfill his role. Joining me on the telecast is Dr. Ajay Dua, who's the former Commerce Secretary. Thank you very much for joining me on the telecast. And in this discussion, in the next 25 minutes that I'm wanting to hold with my panelist, Dr. Ajay Dua, talking about the varied roles that he played, being the economic advisor in the Commerce Ministry, being the chief economic advisor, being the RBI governor, being part of the Planning Commission as the deputy chairman. You feel that the roles that he had been provided fit him just right, keeping in mind his prowess as an economist, as an academic, that he had proved time and again, right from the start when he started his education.
Megha, let me thank you for having me on the show. It's my privilege to pay a tribute to Dr. Manmohan Singh, under whom I had worked as a research assistant in 1970 at the Delhi School of Economics. He had just returned from the United States, where he had worked with the World Bank, and then moved to Delhi to take a position as a professor of international trade at the Delhi School of Economics. I happened to be a PhD student at that time, but in addition to there, I was working with another guide. He engaged me to help him out undertake a project on a book, and I think that was the only book Dr. Manmohan Singh ever wrote. The rest of it are monographs, articles, detailed analysis, but a book, and it was on survey of literature on India's foreign trade. And that is where I saw him extremely closely. And I was, at that time, I had barely written my exam for the civil services, worked with him for 6 months, and we completed the research work for the book. which was published the next year by the Indian Council of Social Sciences Research. What I want to highlight is that his knowledge of economics, his way of mentoring people, carrying a full team of people with different opinions, different shades of points of view, was par excellence the word which you used earlier. And I think India was a big gainer when they got him to do public service in various assignments you listed out, and subsequently as the finance minister, when, as a part of his budget for 1991-92, he had announced the sweeping reforms, which are acronym is the LPG, liberalization, privatization, and the and globalization. These were the three words which were propounded and which have changed India's virtually future from being a socialist country under Pandit Nehru and thereafter under Mrs. Gandhi. He brought in, I wouldn't say a capitalist point of view, but a much more welfare-oriented schemes, and the fact which you highlighted, free trade, that was his PhD thesis under Professor I.M.D. Little in the University of Oxford at Nuffield College. I happened to be present again once with him in the UK when, in the year 2006, when he was leading a delegation for talks with the British Prime Minister, and the, the University of Cambridge, where he had done his tripos after studying at Punjab University BA and MA, decided to give him an honorary causa degree of PhD. So he's a double PhD, one from the University of uh, Cambridge, the University of Oxford first, and thereafter University of Cambridge, which is very unique. And going forward, thereafter he, in the 90s, and in 91 he became a member of parliament for the first time. Thereafter, it was a steady going, contributing his management skills, his economic skills, his administrative skills, but much more, I would say, his self-effacing style of working. Totally never really throw his weight, even though he was the prime minister of the country and he had the full support of the political leadership at that time, he would invariably ask for a consensus in everything. We as bureaucrats, as secretaries, had the privilege very often of being summoned by him to take a point of view on what do we think about X, Y, Z. I do remember once, three of us were there, the then Secretary Economic Affairs, the Secretary Commerce, and I was the Secretary Industries. So the Prime Minister had summoned us to just tell us, and this was his first year as Prime Minister, 2004, 2005. He said, I want you three guys to shake up the system. And I'm there with you. If you have a problem with your ministers or any political issue, do not hesitate to come to me. Look at it, how he could raise the spirit of the bureaucracy morale. We must have gone and spread the word around to all our colleagues that their turn will probably come. But on the economic issues, today we had an audience with the Prime Minister, and this is his assurance. And I would say that in his very first term, he did a remarkable job by coming out with the Manrega scheme. Yes. Manrega, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, it was coined under him. He was the architect in the year 2007. The next governments and others have all continued with it with minor changes here and there. Yeah. Second, what we have continued with it, look at his vision. Not only was he emphasizing, like in 2005, 2007, I remember a call from him directly saying that a friend of mine who's gone into EVs and has set up a plant in Bangalore, please help him out. It is going to be the future of India. Nobody talked about it in 2005, 2006. Next year, look at his vision. He started the dialogue with the US on the nuclear civilian cooperation, on which he staked his prime ministership. because the communists withdrew the support. It was a coalition government, yet it was well managed. The SP, the Socialist Party, under Mulayam Singh Yadav, supported him supported it in the parliament. But thereafter, nuclear energy has been considered as a absolutely feasible proposition as to move on to clean energy.
Right,
I could go
absolutely.
on with certain
Absolutely.
incidents.
Thank you, Ajit Dua, for giving me this summary of the Economist and the statesman that Dr. Manmohan Singh was, and the long-sightedness of Dr. Manmohan Singh led to the reform that we see in our country today. On the telecast with me is Dr. Sharat Kohli as well. And Dr. Kohli, understanding from you, and as had been pointed by Dr. Ajay Dua as well, you know, these landmark policy changes that were brought in by Dr. Manmohan Singh, despite the pressures that he had as the Prime Minister in the two terms, says a lot about the statesman that he is. Goes on to talk a lot about the kind of policy maker he was of the country.
Well, good evening, Megha. Good evening to my fellow panelists and NewsX viewers. Well, I started my own practice as a finance and economics professional back in 1985. And I still remember in 1990-91, when the country had run out of forex reserves and, about 67 tons of gold was airlifted. And I still remember the breakup, about 20 tons going to Bank of Switzerland, 47 tons going to, 47 going to Bank of Switzerland, and Bank of England taking another 20, total of 67. And all we got was, in current dollar terms, 20,000 crores. At that time, it was $2.2 billion because today we have forex reserves of $650 billion plus. So for $2.2 billion, we had to pledge gold. It is then when Dr. Manmohan Singh's vision, and because this was a legacy of a socialist kind of a government, a closed economy, non-liberalized economy, not open to foreign investments, not open to foreign shores. He defied that trend, which was continued by Pandit Nehru for many, many years, and then subsequently late Srimati Indira Gandhi. He defied that trend and he decided to liberalize. P.V. Narasimha Rao, late Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister at that time, and he opened the economy. For me, as an economist, Megha, I think that transformed the country. And till today, when we are the 5th largest economy in the world, I think the seeds or the root of this growth was implanted at that time. Because had we not opened up, we would not have been at the position we are there. Of course, subsequent governments did continue to improvise and probably advance those steps. But the seeds were sown by Dr. Manmohan Singh. So for me, biggest takeaway is that then why forget the VAT? Just before the GST came, the biggest tax reform of the century, they call it, in 2017, it was preceded by VAT. We used to have sales tax before. So he made VAT that was first, I would say, precursor to GST, because it sort of unified the country in VAT. The tax rates were different, state VATs were different, but from sales tax was completely state-based. So he brought a uniform value-added tax. Then I think Mr. Dua was mentioning about any NREG, the National Rural Employment Guarantee. Of course, it was Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's vision, but he was the one who gave it shape. And it was officially notified in 2005. Then in 2009, it became Mahatma Gandhi, Manrega as we call it today, and even current government. So I think the seeds that he sowed in the government, the seeds that he sowed in country's economy, I think they were hard to be uprooted. Normally what happens is, Megha, I'm saying something very important. Normally when policies are made by one political party, they generally get transformed or switched by the other political party when that comes to regime. I'm not making a political statement. I'm just generally commenting on the trend. But Dr. Manmohan Singh's policies that he made, Dr. Manmohan Singh's initiatives which he took on the economy, from his signatures on currency notes, whatever that he did, I think it was hard to obliterate that because they were so economically correct. They were made the right moves. They were made at the right time. I think that is the hallmark of Dr. Manmohan Singh, a man with a vision. He used to work very quietly. I had an opportunity to interact with him back in the year 2005 when he was the Prime Minister. I was part of a delegation. and we were a handful of 5 people. We went to meet him. He didn't speak too much, but whatever documents that we exchanged and whatever that he presented and whatever he wanted to say, he gave by way of a document. And I found that there was no need for him to speak because his vision was so clear. It was so astute. It was absolutely without any ifs and buts.
Yeah.
That, there was no need for a discussion. So I credit Dr. Manmohan Singh for one of the finest finance and economic professionals this country has produced ever. And he's holding these multiple positions, Mega, from being a bureaucrat to being in the Planning Commission, to being in the Reserve Bank, to being in Ministry of Finance, practically to being in the Parliament. Practically every aspect of economics was like running in his blood. So such a person could never go wrong, for that matter,
Yeah.
notwithstanding the political issues which surrounded him during
Right.
his tenure. But then
Right.
otherwise, I think
Okay.
I could not find anything of his match. Mega.
I also have with me Satya Kumar. He's also an economist. Thank you for joining us on the telecast. And it's interesting to know that while he went about bringing about reform in the economy of the country, on the other hand, he was acutely aware of the disbalance in terms of the disparity that was seen amongst the haves and the have-nots. And therefore, when we talk about Manrega and Nrega, and you talk about right to education, the Food Security Act, right to information, the seeds of Aadhaar that was sown during his tenure have to be discussed in detail. And obviously, he was working in conjunction with the Prime Minister of the country back in the day, that was P.V. Narasimha Rao, and together both of them ensured that these two aspects of the economy of the country, if they work together as two wheels of a chariot, would ensure that there is a wholesome growth and progress of the country, not leaving behind the poor and the underprivileged of the country.
Definitely, Mega. Mega, in the Constitution of India, we have directive principles of state policy. These directive principles of state policy is the guiding force for the country's state.
I'll just have to interrupt you, sir. I am right now being joined by Harish Rawat. He is the former Chief Minister of Uttarakhand. Thank you very much, sir, for joining me. And if you could tell us about your interactions, your experiences working with Dr. Manmohan Singh.
देखिए, डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी की शख्सियत का अंदाज इस बात से अक्रॉस द सोशल स्पेक्ट्रम सब लोग जो है उनको याद कर रहे हैं, उनके कृतित्व को याद कर रहे हैं। वो कर्म से पहचाने जाने वाले वो एक कर्मयोगी थे और एक महान व्यक्तित्व था उनका, सबको साथ ले चलने का, और बहुत विनम्र, बड़े सरल और बहुत मृदु स्वभाव के व्यक्ति थे। जो भी उनके संपर्क में आता था
Okay, Harish Rawat, the former Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, was with us. He will join us momentarily. And I come back to Mr. Satya. Satya, interesting that you mentioned about how taking the country forward, it's not just about the economy, it is not just about the reforms, economic reforms, but also the welfare of the downtrodden of the country that needs to be worked upon simultaneously, which was followed to the T by Manmohan Singh, the finance minister, and then Manmohan Singh as the prime minister in the 2 terms.
Definitely, as I was mentioning that states is a champion of the state's directive principles of state policy. Because if you see, most of the visions brought by the founding fathers of the constitution, he has actually actioned it, Manmohan Singh ji, actioned it through various policy measures. Take for example, Manrega program, which is one of the iconic programs even today that the government of India has brought. That was brought in his time. We are all the beneficiary of the liberalization, privatization, globalization that was brought by Manmohan Singh. Because we were in 1991, we know what our deficits was, and then subsequently Narasimha Rao, along with Manmohan Singh, was able to bring transformational program to this country. And of course, when they brought liberalization, privatization, globalization, Manmohan Singh visioned it for manufacturing sector. But what added up to that is the IT sector boom. Subsequently, that came into India's way. So today, the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi is building upon the foundation laid by Manmohan Singh ji. Probably Manmohan Singh ji did not speak about it as vocal as Narendra Modi ji speaks. But if you see the manufacturing policy, if you see the startup policy, if you see the IT policy, if you see the Aadhaar policy, that is direct benefit transfer, everything was built as laid as a foundation by Manmohan Singh, and now from 2014 onwards, Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is building upon it. Not only that, from the perspective of legislative, and Manmohan Singh has been working in different government setup and departments and positions. In fact, he is a 360-degree governance leader. He's a 360-degree governance leader because he has been an RBI governor, he has been a prime minister, he has been a finance minister. On all economic facets of the country, he's an architect of New India, I would say, which came after 1991. And if you see, from the perspective of political issues, Mr. Manmohan Singh was a great consensus builder, because it was not easy to run the country for 10 years with the coalition partners. In fact, the great challenge came on his way when he actually signed a nuclear deal with US. But in spite of the fact, he stood on those mission of bringing consensus, building consensus, not just within the party fold in India in parliament, but also outside India through various foreign policy measures as well. And he was actually a champion for the middle class also. I still remember when he became a prime minister, my family said an educated person with solely using his education was able to claim to the position of prime ministership. And when he brought the policies, he validated every policies from the perspective of constitution also. Because most of his policies, what he brought, never were declared, most of the laws that he legislated during his tenure, it was not declared unconstitutional, most of the laws and regulation. So he was solely driving India's growth for the past roughly about 20 years, I would say. He was a champion of growth of India's growth story from 1991 until 2013. He was the champion of the growth story of India. And beyond this, even public sector undertaking reforms that we see today was also carried out by Manmohan Singh. And of course, during Atal Bihari Vajpayee period, the disinvestment ministry was introduced. But however, the idea of disinvestment also garnered from the economic policy measures brought by Manmohan Singh from 1991.
Absolutely.
So we can keep on talking about this contribution.
Yeah.
Minus Manmohan Singh, India would not be what is India today from the perspective of growth. He even stabilized GDP, and he was able to build consensus between monetary policy and fiscal policy as well.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There are many more things to add up to Manmohan Singh's credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Satya Kumar, and I thank the rest of my panelists for joining me on the telecast and sharing their views and delving upon the past. That's a legacy that has been left behind by Dr. Manmohan Singh. Stay tuned on NewsX as we reflect upon the various aspects of the politician, of the economist, of a bureaucrat and a technocrat, and the architect of the Indian economy. That was Dr. Manmohan Singh. Thanks for watching NewsX.